the last day. It's the last day. I wore a party dress, I wore matching underwear. I am all here and ready for the last day. Um, so, there was always someone who was going to close the festival, and she is a particular inspiration of mine, and I am lucky enough to have met her several times and to call her a friend. She is a wonderful human, and her name is Xinran. Hello everybody, welcome to another day at Gŵyl Festival. Thank you very much. This is going to be, just so you know, our last talk of the whole festival. So this is going to be broadcast on Sunday. So I really hope that everyone has enjoyed the week and have had a lovely time, and everything is going to remain online, as I'm sure I've talked about elsewhere. So you are welcome to view at your leisure. So to close off the festival, I'm so privileged to have with me here today Xinran. We have followed each other a little bit around the country.
And, that's right. I followed you because you've been the festival from Hay and Edinburgh and yeah.
Yeah, and Xinran, in case you didn't know, is the author of many books. Including and most recently The Promise. And yeah, so I was hoping that we could start with a little bit about your radio show, because obviously that's what I'm sure that's where everyone starts. But I was wondering how you came to your radio show, and for people who don't know, it's really what I find most exciting about it, and what you did with it, is you amplified women's voices and told women's stories who weren't being heard. So I wondered if you'd talk a little bit about that.
Wow, that's a long time ago. And yeah, as everybody knows, in China opened after Cultural Revolution in 1980s. Actually, Cultural Revolution ended in 1976, but took another 5 years for the country really, thought through and wake up, and everybody want to get the life back. So that time, Chinese government tried to release the very strict control to the social media, to the main media. So 1988, they tried to make some radio show, which is without censorship. That was very difficult for everyone, from a government to the presenter to the radio station, because during the 100 years, maybe in China history, we never had this kind of program. People had no idea before that. All the radio had been censored, checked, recorded 5 times before they send out to the air. So when they started, they chose selected some presenter from whole China. Actually, I was selected from, I think it's 42,000 people. So 7 women and 7 men. So because that time I've been working over 12 years in the military university, so I would thought knew a little bit international relations, also understand a bit more about Chinese law, what we shouldn't say and what we could say. But in fact, I didn't know at all. I've been trained about 3 months to remember from a very, very long list was the forbidden, never been allowed to talk, include the BBC, Guardian, all these kind of Western media, also include Christmas and Easter. We never allowed to talk about this in 1988. So when I started my radio show, I was really nervous. And also my program in the midnight, and from 22 to the midnight, because we believe that time no one could listen to, because very few people had a radio at that time. China had no television for ordinary people at all. But after 1 week, I remember I got so many letters come in. I was very surprised how many people listened to my radio. And at that time, I have no idea how to run this radio show. And also, I was very nervous. And so I started very carefully. I remember first day I talked about my son, who was only 6 months old. And I just talk about, Western music, history, and books. Then last 10 minutes, I talk about my son. But afterwards, I got so many letters. People hated me. They really hated me. They said, how dare you say you love your son in the radio? Because love, these words, is capital words, is disgusting. So I was really shocked. So how naive that time for most Chinese. I believe that time more than 90% Chinese population were uneducated. I'm talking about international stand, uneducated peasants or farmers.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. From the radio show, I feel like a lot of your even your fiction writing all sort of stems from the people's stories that you've either heard from the radio show or listened to later in life. And I was wondering, how much do you see yourself as a fiction writer, and how much do you see yourself as a journalist who's telling other people's stories?
Well, the first of all, I never really thought I'm a writer, qualified writer, and because I don't think I got the talent to write something like a fictionalized story. I always admire that kind of writer. In the first page, they can give the person the birth, and later on, they can kill them in another page. But for me, I think because I'm journalist, I saw myself as journalist. Being journalist as my passion or beliefs from my childhood. So all of my stories from my interview, even people thought like Miss Chopsticks is a fiction book. Actually, 3 character in the book, they are true story. I met them. One is in Beijing, one is in Shanghai, one is in Nanjing. But later on, I found I have to write their stories. And because so many peasant girls come to the city since the 1980s, we didn't know how to respect them. We didn't know how to deal with them. And also, for the whole society, I have to be honest, at that time, people really look down on countryside peasants. So I learned so much from the 3 girls, and how they survived, even they never knew how to read and write. And in the countryside, they never had the right to have their own names. They only given the name by the numbers because they're a girl. So their father treated them as a chopsticks because he believes only boy can hold a family roof as a beam. So when I decided to write some stories, so many of them come to my, writing. So finally, I accepted. I listened to my husband, later husband, Toby Edie, who's a literary agent. He always fascinating about Chinese culture and history, and also he always encouraged me to speak out for those hidden voices and the girls, the women's voices from China. So he suggested I should put them together as of one family, but it was extremely difficult for me to find a mother for the 3 girls because they told me different mother character or background, whatever. So finally, I choose the number 1 sisters. Actually, it's number 3 in the book, and her mother, because I met her sister and I knew more story about her mother, so I found her mother's figure or background very similar other 2. So I think I'm a journalist, and I'm journalist, and also I'm very lucky because I've been interviewed more than 300 Chinese woman since 1988. And I learned my country, my people, and choose history from them, not from textbooks in the university and not from, the median or whatever. Even never had this kind of chance to learn from my own family because my parents were silent. So this is why I was very, very naive when I become radio presenter. And I thought I knew everything about China, and I've been highly educated. But when I start my journey to the countryside, to interview people, to meet people, I realized I was very naive. I'm still very naive. And so I decided to give myself a re-education from 1988. Yeah. So since then, I never stopped until now. And I think I'm a journalist. I'm lucky, and thanks to my interviewees, you allowed me to speak for them, written their life stories. Yeah.
How much? I've got two questions. One,
Yes,
if you were, where do you think the girls of the women from this story would be now? Where do you think that, like, how would their lives have taken them sort of 30 years on?
Well, yeah, this question, thank you very, very much. Actually, I never stopped thinking about these questions because there are so many women in my life as part of my family member, or at least my life memories. So like the three girls in the chopsticks, these books, I followed the number 5 until I think 5 years ago when the Dragon Water Center changed. It's not there anymore, so I lost contact with her. But I still keep contact with number 3, big sisters, because her sister, who's a cleaner, still in Nanjing, but number 3 went back to the countryside, actually repeat her mother's life. And the last story I heard from her was she's pregnant, her second child, because she had a first child stole her. She had to give the son to the husband family, otherwise could be suffered the same things as her mother. And number 6, the younger sister, or in fact, she was number 9. She was in Beijing. She just completely different from another 2 who, I admire, wanted back to the countryside. She just want to cut off from her countryside background. She wants to go to see the world. She wants to speak English. She wants to have a degree. Yes, and she loves books. And so I think that this why I chose these 3, because they are, as many, many Chinese people and the Chinese women, the Chinese girls grew up in the last 30 years in China. Compared to most country in the world or into the history, I think China had made remarkable change in the last 40 years. And I know some side is horrible, went wrong, but some side was very good. If you go to China, you can see, and the people's life is much improved, and lots of girls' life in the cities. China, we have 665 cities. The girls' life there is much more improved. And also, as those migrants, workers, and the women, their life being changed a lot with respect, with a living condition, and with their own confidence as an independent woman. I think they change a lot. But again, another side, we have to see still quite big numbers, Chinese women in the countryside. They still suffered from this kind of traditional, beliefs or poor condition. I was in China from last December to February this year, just before this coronavirus, and I interviewed quite a number of Chinese women in the countryside. I can see life for them hasn't changed very much. Just like chopsticks, the girls, the mothers. No, but for the girls, for the young people, their life, I think, have changed a lot, a lot.
Yeah, that was literally going to be my next question, and you've answered it beautifully. I was going to say how much has changed, and there we are. Thank you. How have you changed from writing Miss Chopsticks and from these early stories? How have you changed as an interviewer when you were interviewing women this January, February time? Has your style stayed the same? What's important to you when talking to people?
Well, I love this question because I never been asked this question, and actually, that is yeah. Thank you. That made me think. I thought about my writing style. One side, I want to keep it as a radio or representative for Chinese women, spoke for them, not just for myself. Another side, I have to say, because I was very naive, and also I didn't understand very much what kind of Chinese woman's life, because China is a big, huge, it's like a whole Europe. You know, I can't use the Italian story to explain the French or English, you know. So in China, it's quite similar. And during my 40 years research interview, I can see myself by your question guide. I realized actually step by step from, I would say, from tree leaves to the roots. And before when I interview people, most of my question, like I interview these 3 girls, is based on their daily life, what I thought, what I felt. And now I interview people, I like to dig more question about their family background, at least 2 generations before, and also what's happened to their family and what's happened to China during the time. And also I found in the last 40 years, and lots of Chinese people have left their land. They move around quite a lot, which has never happened in China's 3,000 or 5,000 years history, because we never allowed people travel. And according to Chinese law, only in 2003, we allowed people free travel. Before that, it seems everybody can travel, but you have to have local authorities' permission, piece of the paper. Otherwise, you could be arrested or questioned by the policeman. So that kind of changed a lot in China. In myself, before I didn't realize, I just, want to find out why your life like this, what made you come to the city, or what's happened to your parents, and what's your dream for. Then now I would ask more about their family roots, and even themselves, what you think about China to the future. Because before, lots of interviewees, the Chinese women, I never dare to ask them about the country. When I ask them what about the country, they would say nothing to do with me. They dare not to talk anything like that. But now you can see everybody has their own voices, and they're maybe not such a freedom talking the social media or speak to the media, but it's much more thinking and free thinking or independent view than before. So that helped me about my writing quite a lot. Yeah.
What this is going to put you on the spot, so feel free if you don't have an answer to this.
Go ahead.
But what work of sort of the last, what work are you most proud of, and what work in the last sort of period of your writing, whilst you've been sort of publishing books, what do you most like? What would you tell people to go and read if they had to go and read just the first one?
Well, as an author, I might have a very different, as the audience, because a lot of reader I can see since I published the first book, The Good Woman of China. And yes, that one has been published over 40 languages, and I think being bestseller over 20 countries as well. And some countries use that as a history reference book for the universities. And if people care about a woman's history or woman's life or China, I always believe between a different religion, different culture, family and the woman's story are universal. It's the bridge to all of us in different thinkings. And for the people keen about a love story, I think Sky Burial. Sky Burial is really, for me, is she changed my life. I used to be very moody, and sometimes really hated to argue with the government some, rules, and sometimes very sad for my audience. But when I met this woman, when I interviewed her, when I researched her story, I learned some beautiful, beautiful things from Tibetan's culture, because they believe life in circle, and the moment is for the future, not for the past. So angry, regret, annoy, and hate, all is about past.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't waste our today's life for the past. We should, gather the positive thinking for the tomorrow. So that one changed my life a lot. And I discovered for many people who move to other country or to want to see China and the first time travel there or try to understand Chinese in your own country, I would recommend it, Miss Chopsticks, because the Three Sisters journey to the strange city, I think it's very similar for foreigners or Chinese. We went to each other and to see the strange culture or this kind of beatings or nervous or curious. Yeah. But from my deep heart, spend my most time to do my writing is China Witness. China Witness is not really received by the readers when they published, but I can see more and more university or student or young people or people travel to China start liking that book. I spent more than 25 years to follow one group of elders from their age of 50 all the way to their 75, 80, or 90 years old. So for me, they are my life teacher, and also they are Chinese founders, modern China founders, and they told me lots of the hidden history and how they devote their life to the Communist Party and why, and how they see China today with their confused and suffering or lost with their own children, and also what they're proud of being Chinese, and not just a family member, and as a citizens or Chinese, what they have done for the country. Because since 1840s, the Opium War and China just lost ourselves. So for that generation, in the over 25 years, they've been told me about this kind of national proud from the roots, from blood, from their bones. I was very touched by that. And also they have guided me, lighted me to see my country with such a beautiful and a proud civilization, not just by last 100 years political chaos or even some political black white. It's a seed country with the whole things from roots to the leaves. I think it was China Witness. I'm very proud of that. And for the family, much close to my personal life, I would say is The Promise, the latest book, because that book is the first book in my writing through the 4 generations of one family. During their dating stories, you can see how China been changed during the Civil War, warlords war, political killings, and the cultural revolution, and open policy. Actually, between the generations, we really, really struggled. Not just deal with outside the door society, and also how to talk and communicate or understand between the mother and daughters. It's very difficult. That book helped me to understand my mother more and better than before.
Wow, I think I'm gonna have to buy China Witness, you know. I think
yeah, that book when I finished was over 800 words, but my publisher thought it's too long, so they cut off 500,000 words. So only less than 300,000 left. I still got so many stories. You know, this, I believe, for next 2-3 generations, my record of these people, those people, over 50 of them, could be, you know, very valuable for the national archives to the young generations.
Do you hope to get all 800,000 words published at some point, or were you happy with the editing?
I do hope that book, that my interview could become 3 volume, you know, because so much in the my interview and based on 100 years history of China. But I understand my publisher see me as a non-fiction writer, which is more about audience interesting, not just history. On another hand, I'm not an academic historian, so I can't give this kind of, you know, historical view to see that. And also, I much prefer my writing about ordinary people's life, because I found between the countries, most books or writings is a bit like a window shopping.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, you see some national trust or museum, but I much prefer bring my readers to Chinese families, villages, street, or even people's kitchen. Listen to people's voices and feel granny's cooking or mother's taste, you know, even father's silence. That all universal in our life.
Yeah. Absolutely. When you've because this is a festival about translated books, so all of your books in English have been translated by Esther Tildesley. Is that how you say it correctly?
Yes.
What's your and then obviously you've been translated into many other languages too. So I was wondering what your relationship with, obviously you can't have a personal relationship with all the translators, but do you tend to know them? And in the what do you think about them? Have you read the English versions of your books?
Well, yes, I think compared to most writer, I'm very, very lucky author. I have some very good English translator like Esther Tildesley and Julie Lovell and Nikki Hammond, and also William Spencer, and the last translator for my latest book, The Promise. Yeah. With all of them, I have a very close relationship with them. They are very, very good friends of mine, because I believe translation, not just between the language, it's more important is the meaning of the language, the culture of the language, and also writers or writing's personality. of the translation. And also I'm a non-fiction writer, and I represent many Chinese people's voices. So I don't want to uniform their voices like, products things. So I want they have a character paired. I want people can feel them. But all of my translators in English, from English, Chinese to English, they're brilliant about this. So this is why sometimes, for example, with Esther, we could have more than 3-4 hours for just very small paragraph. Yeah, and how to understand the peasant's feeling, because peasants speak very short sentence, but very meaningful.
Yeah.
And my latest book, lots of Chinese traditional poem, the very old poem, so people use different words for the different items or lifestyle. So I need to spend lots of time talk with Will about what's the meaning for in that time. Beautiful poem sentence, but how to understand it in today's time. So after English translation, most of my book being translated over 20 languages, except the last one. And the promise, because just published the last year. And I have a close friends from French, Germany. Other language we couldn't manage because they don't speak English. And I found more and more country like French and German and France and Germany, they start thinking to translate my book from Chinese into their own language. I think it's very good, but it's difficult for me because I couldn't speak their languages. Also for the translation, I have to say, without those translators, we won't be able to get story from different culture, different language, different religion, or different time of the people. And also, be honest with you, I never expected any book could be translated 100% because we are different. So like a Chinese language, we have 18,000 characters survived from last 3,000 years compared to English 26 letters. So you see how much difference. So extremely difficult, brilliant, great for the translator. So this is why any chance I like to take is thanks to my translator and each single translator who treated the translation as their beliefs or even religion. Because without translation and translators' work, we won't understand, we won't, succeed to living together with understanding in peace.
Absolutely. Maybe I should adopt that and be a little motto for the festival.
Thank you.
What else did I want to ask on? Before we get on to what you're doing at the moment, I was wondering what skills you think are important in telling other people's stories. What do you think is the thing that you are most, it doesn't have to be the thing you're most successful at, but what do you prioritize when you're listening to other people?
I believe everybody has the secret and they have a heart-filled life story. So how to get that out, it's not easy. Like I talk about China Witness, took me more than 25 years, so nearly over 20 years to let them believe. I really want to listen to the truth, not just propaganda or not just polite words or not just hidden voices, and fictionalize the life stories. So that was very difficult to get people to trust me, to understand I want to represent their voices, not my voices. Like my son, when he read my book, he often point out, say, Mom, you are quite stupid in the book. So I said to him, yes, because A, I'm not clever as much as other people. And B, when you have the conversation, it's the way to show people you are not top of them, and then you want to learning from them as a student, as a listeners, as a space, or very simple, just a pair of ears with your heart. So that one for me during my interview and the writing, both difficult. Before my writing, I always take more than 3-5 months, walk around or thinking through overnight what exactly this person's voice is. I've been interviewed so many of them, each one more than 100 hours. So what's the exactly structure, the soul voice, what's that? So it took me quite hard to figure out. And also with their personality and through their sentence or through their body language, because I want to show my readers in picture. Because the Chinese culture is visualized culture, is in a very beautiful, colorful image. Even our language is the same things. We have more than 20 words to tell you wife. Wife, these words, we have more than 20. So each difference you can see, the man love the wife, or the wife's class is lower or higher than him, or his failing, or his education, or his background, whatever. So you can see this man, how his judgments to his wife by the words he chooses to tell you, this is my wife. Yeah, so in Chinese, very different. So the translation, I much prefer to represent this kind of beautiful Chinese culture. So for my writing, I try to avoid it, all the adjective and adverb. Use a verb to get picture out, and to help translator represent their voices into another language with a picture, image.
Yeah.
So yeah, that for me is how to get people trust me first, and then how to represent them as who they are, what they are. It's very important for me too.
Okay. That's beautiful. So what are you working on at the moment? So I know that you're working at the BBC at the moment. What have you spent the last few months doing? And then I'd also love to hear about the new book you're writing, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm freelance for some mediums, include the BBC World Service or other channels, sometimes like consultant. During the coronavirus, I was the very first group of registered NHS volunteers to help local elders, because my age, and also I don't have a car to drive. So most is help people collect medicines, shopping for them, and also we had a lot of talk in the night, because when they're lonely, they need someone to talk, they're scared, or they miss their families, or they just have someone to share their memories when they're getting old. So yeah, I spend a lot of time to do that. And also I started writing my new book, and actually I started a long time ago, but I'm a bit struggle with this book, because we discovered a voice message from the family secret. They hiding the story into the dictionary when we discovered USB and the secret letters. So now I'm trying to typing and get all the archives come out into the words that I will edit to see. And it's a very moving story again. And but how to structure the book, I would say possibly based on 3 letters: the letter to the wife, letter to the daughter, and the letter to his son. And I don't know yet. I'm still working on that. Sometimes I have to dig a lot of the background and archives to confirm the story, to confirm what they said. Because this gentleman working through the Soviet and East German in China as well, and with lots of French and Americans, of course with the British as well. So I needed to understand what he talked about. Yeah, and also it's a very moving letter he wrote to his wife.
Yeah. So interesting. Is there are there any, obviously those are the particular challenges of writing this book. Are there any things that you find hard or that you love about each book? Are there any similarities in the writing process?
Yes, so I do. I think the more things is the first of all, I love to dig out their feeling about family, because the family is the roots culture of China. If you learn the Chinese language, if you go to China, if you see many, many things, visible or invisible, is based on family structure. For example, children never dare argue, fighting with the parents before the one-child policy. And because this is our traditional rule, you never question anyone, you know, older than you or bigger than you or classes higher than you. So how to get the Chinese feeling and the story come out through the family is part of the, you know, very important, how to tell the Chinese story different from other cultures. So, but the Chinese family value have been changed in the last 100 years. A lot, almost upside down. Not just for you and Western readers and for Chinese ourselves. We still struggled how to deal with that. So that is, I always want to get it. And then secondly, because the Chinese women, from our history roots until 1950s, until Mao said women should have half sky, you know, we hardly have chance to speak out, to talk about emotion, relations, and love, or even physical pleasure, all these kind of things. But this is where human nature, you know, we are always there. So how they think about this, particularly nowadays in 3 generations, my mom's generation, my generation, and my children's generation, how they see this big change. Because my mom was a political marriage. She had no chance to choose her lover. And for me, it's come from naive, because cultural evolution had never been really educated. And then later on, is we never had this kind of physical or, you know, humanity or whatever education, psychologists. I had no idea about the lovers or, you know. And for my son's generation in China, they can change a boyfriend and a girlfriend every day, every week, every day. So it's really struggled for us. So this is why when I writing, I always want to get this difference come out of the interview, to let people talk about this, because this is what's happening in China. And the other things is in my writing, I always want to give people some roots background. For example, why, you know, Chinese bandit girls, you know, from 1991 until now, over 160,000 Chinese girls being banded. And, you know, and also China now we have 400 million the men's more than women, 40 million men's more than women. So everybody thought, the boys, how to find a wife for them, a girlfriend. But I have to think about those missing the girl's life. What's that? So why this happened? A part of the history, culture, and we have to give the reason of a political and what life fast changing China. So this is three kind of things for me is quite important: family, women's heart, hidden voices, and China change background information. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and especially thank you for the role model you set for raising women's voices and women's stories up. I really admire your work a lot.
I admire what you're doing for the translation festival. That's so important. I wish I could, have done or devote something or gave some more valuable things to a festival. I think it's so important. Without the translation, we are just living, our corner without the whole world. Thank you, and thanks to you and your team.
Thank you, for even talking. That is more than enough. And thank you. And goodbye. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thanks.
Well, hi everybody. We wanted to do a little wrap up of sort of the festival and talk a little bit about how we got here essentially. And yeah, so I wanted to start with I brought Will on because Will's been with me the whole way, and it was basically 10 days ago. I was doing the maths. No, was it 10 days ago? It was the week Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. No, that's 12 days. 12 days. So 12 days ago, we were on the phone. And there was no festival. And then 4 hours later, we got off the phone and there was a festival. There's an Instagram story I put up that day that was sort of me tricking myself into doing the festival. It made it legit. I remember posting it and being well, now there's got to be a festival. I've told people there's a festival. I'm gonna have to do it now. I also, I don't know if you know this actually. So basically I've been doing the chalkboards and I'd had this dome that I wanted to build in the garden, and I knew that I wanted a way of sort of displaying the chalkboards and sort of bringing the project to a close in a natural way. So I'd built the dome, I'd sort of been going along with all these things, and in this is the bit that I'm not sure you know of. In this bit, I'd sort of written down a few ideas of what it could be, and so I'd sort of been well, it could just be sort of for my family, it could just be this kind of thing, and then I'd be well, what would I dream it was? What would sort of be the dream scenario? And the dream scenario, I just wrote down the name Daniel Hahn, who is a kids translator and a big name in the translation world, and I just booked him last night for next year.
So what was it that firstly attracted you about throwing a literary festival by yourself, and secondly, I suppose, what stopped you from going after those people to begin with?
So I've always wanted to do my own literary festival, but in a sort of way that you think that would be nice. In a way that is I've worked at literary festivals and seen the director or sort of your upper organizing leadership team of a literary festival and being I would like that job. I think I could do that job and I would really like that job. And so, but never in a million years had that sort of gone from actually doing one. Genuinely, a month ago, you could would not have dreamed that I was going to do one. And in some ways it's this fact that I didn't have any work at literary festivals this summer. It's the fact that I was at home, and sort of just before we had the conversation, which then snowballed into the festival, I had finished basically all my chalkboards. I was sort of at the point where you like start a new project, and I just didn't really know what there were several different options as to what it could be, and none of them were like sitting right, none of them were exciting me, none of them were sort of like, I just wasn't going ahead with any of them. So I was sort of distracting myself with building the dome, and then I'd finish that and was like, and then basically phoned you. Because we created this like time pressure thing for ourselves, mostly because we didn't expect it to be big.
Yeah.
Like if we'd expected it to be big, we wouldn't have said, let's start it on Sunday.
Yeah.
We just said, let's start it on Sunday, speaking from Thursday, because we expected it to be me talking to my friends and like me creating just book related content myself. And then we sort of, so it was the time pressure of like, I have 3 days to put a festival on. So I just like got rid of some of those inhibitions, like some of those things that just stop you from emailing someone, they won't like me, like I'm a stranger, like I'm reaching out for no reason, like, or just sort of things that make
time to be afforded that kind of, I don't know, that anxiousness going in. The email had to be sent.
Exactly. That was exactly it. Like that time pressure made everything work smoother. I have like in my notebooks, sorry, that one's really ugly. Let me just show the pretty ones. I have in my notebooks I have in my notebooks like the trajectory where I have like a list of original people that I thought I could involve, and like I've got a list of books I could talk about. So like I sort of, because we genuinely did have a conversation where I think you suggested about 5 minutes of content a day.
Yeah. And then we upped it to 12. So the original idea was for Caitlin to speak about one book for 5 minutes. And then we said, well, actually, you could probably do 2 books, make it 12 minutes, because people, 5 minutes isn't a very long time. 12 minutes is something that you can log on and see, every day. You can, 12 minutes is quite a substantial amount of time. And we were like, great, 12 minutes of content a day, fantastic. Let's run with that. 2 books. Doesn't matter that we don't have chalkboards for all of them.
Yeah.
And then, what was the longest day? Must have been
over an hour, like an hour and 10.
And then plus Lawrence on top of that.
Oh yeah, so 2. That would be 2 full hours.
2 hours, And that was something that I don't know if you found surprising. These sort of literary world characters much more than I do, but just how cooperative everyone was, and how really, like, people got excited, didn't they? People got excited quickly and wanted to be involved and wanted to talk about the work that they'd done, and were really happy to.
Yeah, it's mad. Like, it's actually ridiculous because everybody turned it around so quickly. Yeah. Like, I'd emailed them on Friday and they would be back, and I would say, like, can you talk to me tomorrow?
Yeah.
And they'd be like, yeah, sure. Yeah. And there was Saturday and Sunday in particular, and then also Monday, were like ridiculous. Like, I spent sort of 7 hours in this room, like just doing interviews straight. A good example of how you pushed me was that I kept calling it at the beginning a little festival, a mini festival, a garden festival, a little thing I'm doing.
And also something that you were helping set up was the other thing. You weren't quite okay with being the festival director, and
it was so useful to have you there to push me away from doing that and make it real. So we wanted to talk a little bit about why translated fiction and why we focused on translated fiction. So from my point of view, it was all very natural. Like, it wasn't like I picked to do a translated fiction festival. It was definitely the product of other forces. One had been that I had been searching out and reading, in particular, Latin American fiction for quite a while, and that was like really driving an interest of mine. The other was, as Will and I have spoken about many times, was sort of a reaction to the focus on the publishing cycle, because the publishing cycle makes a lot of noise, and a lot of the books that get discussed all the time are naturally the books that have just been published, and that is how it should be, and that's how you know, the book industry stays afloat and makes money. So whilst we live in a capitalist society, like, you know, it's very understandable. However, like, that can be quite hard, I think, for a reader to understand what they should read, where their actual interests might be, and what's good and what's bad, and what is sort of like a defining read for them, or where they might find their like interest particularly cultivated. So I think Will and I have talked many times about this, and I think you've actually suggested in the past that you wanted to make 2020 your year of reading only things that were published sort of 50 years ago. Like, didn't you?
Which I have failed at, but yeah, that's a kind of personal, as you say, reaction against the publishing cycle. I don't think something needs to have been around for 50 years for it to prove that it's stood the test of time. But I also do know that I've read things very soon after they've been released and been, you know, let down. And I have a big problem with book reviews and book reviewers, and the quotes that you see on book jackets. Because everything's instantly a classic, and everything's a modern classic, you know, before you know anyone's read it. And books like that do exist. You know, The Plague was like that, hugely popular the minute it came out, and obviously has stood the test of time. But yeah, so many books earn that moniker and actually don't live up to it.
Absolutely. And so it was this kind of idea that sort of like, how can you better recommend? I actually was talking to my friend Lucy, and she was like, I feel like whenever I look at these lists of books, whatever, you know, she was just like, I don't know how to pick books. So these conversations were going on, and then it was that I'd been doing these chalkboards, and I'd sort of latched on to translated fiction as a way of like structuring what books I was going to chalkboard up, and sort of me, and it was literally off my own collection, because I didn't want to chalkboard anything I didn't genuinely enjoy or recommend. So when I was doing them as a series of recommendations, so like I think I did novels, novellas, short stories, children, and like a form focus week, which was like inverse plays, that kind of thing. Like they, like a way of sort of looking at my bookshelves and being like, well, what am I going to pick, was first of all translated. And then there are also, I think the last thing that pulled it together is that there are a lot of people talking already about great British and English in English writing stuff, and that if you were to amplify and create a sort of a niche group, like, why not translation? Like, it's definitely something we both believe in terms of sort of diversifying voices. I think you had what was your quote that you just said about like reading is a good way to like borrow someone's mind?
Yeah, exactly that. And the idea of borrowing someone's mind who doesn't look, sound, or sort of live the same way as you do. And
it's just definitely like, something we were passionate about. That's really all there is to it. Yeah,
absolutely.
Something you said that you've grown more interested in and like have been surprised by the festival, and something that I think I had slightly realised, having been lucky enough to like talk to translators already, is that translators are like so interesting to talk to.
No, absolutely, yeah. That's been the one. This festival has redefined for me what I thought translators' day jobs were, you know, and the level of creativity that goes into being a translator.
It's definitely something we want to keep doing. We hope to have another festival next year. I think there will be another festival next year for sure.
Form and function yet to be disclosed, even to ourselves.
I've actually already booked people for it, so like so we're definitely so I hope that like you guys are excited by that, and that you'll stick around for next year, which will be in some form, and probably some element in which someone can physically attend as well as virtually attend. We're committed. We're committed, aren't we?
Yeah, of course. Your committee is committed. Very literary festival mug.
It is. It is. Actually, Emma Bridgewater is the literary festival mug.
Oh,
Like,
fuck that though.
no, they all have her. Like, they all have her. Like, hey, Emma, they all have like limited edition Emma Bridgewater mugs.
Oh my god, I've just spilt my coffee everywhere.
You're fucking wreck. Right, shall I stop recording?
No, because you can put that in the out. You can do like a little. You can do like an edits thing, like a
bloopers reel.
You can do like the making of this very short and fairly straightforward video.
So, hello. What? You thought this wasn't just an opportunity to like self-promote myself? Oh, you fools, you fools. I'm going to read a poem that I wrote about Tintin Abbey, which, if you didn't know, this is where this festival is happening. It is happening, Gŵyl is happening in Tintin, at my mum's house, just up the road. It's the house that I grew up in. And yeah, so a lot of people, as you might know, have written about Tintin Abbey, the most famous being Wordsworth, who wrote lines composed a few miles above Tintin Abbey. But also there's a very good poem by Allen Ginsberg about him taking LSD and like tripping, like just over there, literally by that church up that hill. Then you have Zadie Smith wrote a response to these works. And in the response to these works, it's like a nice little essay. It's a lovely essay, would highly recommend. It's not really that much about Tintin, but she does describe visiting Tintin in it. And a particular bit of that essay that always frustrated me is that she's describing going to a wedding further into Wales, and she describes turning off the motorway and pulling up here at Tintin Abbey. Now, as anyone who could live here knows, you don't just turn off the motorway and turn up at Tintin. How remote Tintin is has always been a big feature of growing up here. What else? Oh, also, importantly, my sister is behind the camera, and that becomes important for obvious reasons once I begin. So, this is Gestation in the Wye. Last time I returned, my sister picked me up from the train. She drives now. We know the road to Tintin in our bodies as a pause that punctuates with a there and back, there and back. So your portrayal of it as a single space, I turned off the motorway, then pulled up at the Abbey, denigrates that the first time I took the bus 69 to school, I thought the distance insurmountable. I would surely waste away before wasting my life this way for 7 years, a distant memory now. As we come round the corner, the Abbey comes into sight. Stand up, press the bell, push forwards. It's time to get off, nearly home. Fresh air now tastes fresh, and my eyes struggle to adjust to the vast iridescence again. Even in winter, the windows show evergreens protruding between bare branches. 4 years have passed since here was home. Not anymore. But as we drive by, I still know the frames with which you cut my landscape. Conifers were felled, opening new sky for new houses. A hedge was trimmed, the pavement underneath free for walking again. The pubs as always, opening, closing and painting. Always closed now. And as my mum drives to work in the morning, white mist rises from the river. What happy accident is this, you cry? An aspiring writer grown up on the banks of the Wye? What felicitous fortitude landed you in that cradle? I had only the vaguest idea literature existed here until my first boyfriend spoke in the car of his dad's adoration of my home. I rolled my eyes and said Rowling hated it here and quashed his enthusiasm. I would say that daily life makes drear every place, but Tintin is particularly well suited. All industry gone, the ironworks now a historic site, yet Range Rovers are not built by the divide. This is a desirable, commutable place to live. As we drive past the walkout from the bus, we pass the path into the woods where I smoked my first joint, the monkey puzzle tree now gone, and the car park where Ollie goes to have sex. This is a place, used to, maybe still does, don't know. This is a place so safe that when walking home from youth club on a Wednesday night, just in that building right over there, it was a fun game to be scared. Sometimes we used to climb the gate, avoid the cows and clamber all over the abbey walls. Mostly though, Facebook and fathers were calling. Burnt orange leaves fell to the concerns of creating burnt orange hair. The first time I did it, the bottle exploded everywhere, making the bathroom a murder scene. Quiet comes when you escape your life. Tintin is only quiet to me at night, and gestation in the Wye does not mean that you know your body is holy, or that you meet each day the same reverently. 2012, Zadie, lost in repose as epiphany took hold. Vast, silent valley. 2012, my idle tears falling, I perfected self-doubting, vast, silent valley. 2012, Malala shot in the head in a different, vast, silent valley. I was jealous of her. Thus my cosy countryside solitude brought with it self-centered white supremacy. I wanted to be lauded, aplomb in the face of applause. When I read you, I read how you felt, how your eyes took what was outside in, how you felt whilst writing, and I feel now. My dad once said that what people think about first, second, third is I. So I declared vehemently, not me! Not me! When I am away, moments of nostalgia turn me to googling photos of home, and it is only now that I am here again that I know. And it is only now that I am here again that I know what was wrong with them. I do not gaze from the Wye at the Wye from the sky. I do not gaze from the Wye at the I'll start this a little bit again. When I'm away, moments of nostalgia turn me to googling photos of home, and it's only now that I'm here again that I know what was wrong with them. Do not gaze at the Wye from the sky. I see the Wye from 5'1" height or a car, and when I stare, 7,300 eyes stare back from fields that are no more. I have the warmest, holiest love for them and my sister who remain here, and it was a privilege to grow up in Sylvian Cottage. But other than preaching from the devil's pulpit, what ascendancy can this roofless church offer? Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much to Xinran, and thank you to everybody who made this festival possible. Thank you to you guys for listening and watching, and thank you so much to all the translators, authors, and everyone who contributed their time, effort, and knowledge and thoughts to making the festival possible. All the best. See you next year.